Sarah Duncan stood 6'2" in her worn boots, and on that sweltering July afternoon in 1872, she had just thrown a full-grown man through the saloon doors like he weighed nothing. But what happened next would change her life in ways she never saw coming. The drunk hit the dusty San Francisco street hard, cursing as he scrambled away. Sarah stood in the doorway of the Golden Gate Saloon, hands on her hips, chest heaving. He'd grabbed her while she was ordering supplies for her dying father. She'd given him one warning. He hadn't listened. Now the other patrons gave her the same wide berth they always did, the kind reserved for women who didn't fit the mold, who were too tall, too strong, too much. At 23, Sarah had accepted her fate. No man wanted a woman who could beat them at arm wrestling. No man wanted someone who stood taller than they did. And certainly no man wanted someone who refused to apologize for existing in a world that hadn't made room for her. But then she saw him. A stranger sat astride a paint horse, one leg hooked casually around the saddle horn, and he was grinning. Not the mocking grin she usually got from men, something else entirely. Something that made heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the summer sun. He dismounted with easy grace, tall himself. Maybe 6'4", she guessed. Sandy brown hair touched his collar beneath a battered hat. His eyes were the color of whiskey and lamplight. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat as he approached. His voice rumbled through her chest like distant thunder. "That was the finest piece of bouncing I've seen since I left Montana." Then he said something Sarah had never heard in her entire life. "You looking for work?" Sarah blinked, completely thrown. "Work doing what? Tossing drunks for a living." "Running cattle, breaking horses, mending fences," he continued, extending his hand. "All the things that make a ranch run smooth. Kieran Lawson. Just bought the old Fitzgerald spread about 10 miles north. 3,000 acres and not a single reliable ranch hand to show for it." She took his hand automatically. His grip was firm, calloused, the hand of a man who knew real work. "Sarah Duncan, and I already have a ranch to run, Mr. Lawson." "You run it alone?" His eyebrows rose with interest, not disbelief. "My father's sick, lung fever. Hasn't been able to work for months. I've been managing on my own." She stopped herself. Why was she telling this stranger her troubles? But Kieran wasn't done surprising her. "Miss Duncan, wait. In all my years ranching from Montana to Texas, I've never seen someone with your strength and capability. Most men I hire can't throw their weight around like that, literally speaking. I pay fair wages, provide meals, and I don't tolerate any nonsense from the other hands. A woman who can work would be treated with the same respect as any man on my ranch." He paused, that devastating grin returning. "Though I suspect you could teach most of them a thing or two about earning respect the hard way." Despite herself, Sarah felt her lips twitch into a smile. Something was different about this man. Something dangerous. "I'll be at the land office tomorrow morning if you want to talk more," Kieran said, settling his hat. He mounted his horse with fluid ease and rode off, leaving Sarah standing there feeling more confused than she had in years. Old Thomas Brennan poked his head out from the saloon. "You all right? That cowboy bother you?" "No, Tom. He didn't bother me at all." She shook her head. "That's what makes it so strange." The ride back to the Duncan Ranch took an hour, and Sarah spent most of it thinking about Kieran Lawson's peculiar offer. 3,000 acres was a substantial spread. The Fitzgerald place had been abandoned for 2 years after old John Fitzgerald died, and his children back east wanted nothing to do with California ranching. It would take a hell of a lot of work to bring it back, but not as much work as saving her own ranch. The Duncan Ranch was only 800 acres, and right now it looked nearly as bad as the Fitzgerald place. Sarah grimaced as she drove past fences she knew needed mending, pastures where cattle grazed on grass that was too sparse. Her father had always handled the planning and managing, while her mother ran the house and Sarah provided the muscle. But her mother had died 3 years ago from influenza. Now her father lay in bed coughing himself to exhaustion every night, and Sarah was trying to do it all alone. She was strong, stronger than most men, but even she couldn't be everywhere at once. The house her grandfather had built 40 years ago needed paint and new shutters, but it was solid. It had always been full of love. Now it felt too quiet, too empty, except for her father's labored breathing upstairs. She hauled the supplies inside and climbed the stairs. Robert Duncan had been a big man once, but illness had whittled him down to a shadow. His face was gray against white pillows, his breathing rattling. "Papa." She touched his forehead gently. Warm but not feverish. His eyes fluttered open. "You get the supplies?" "All of it, including the medicine Dr. Chen said might help." She helped him sit up and spooned the bitter tonic into his mouth. He grimaced but swallowed. "Expensive," he muttered. "Don't worry about that now." But Robert caught her hand, his grip barely there. "We can't keep going like this. The ranch is too much for one person." "I'm managing." "You're running yourself into the ground." His voice was stern despite its weakness. "Your mama wouldn't want this for you. No time for anything else. No chance at a life of your own. This is my life, taking care of you. You should be married by now, should have children, a partner to share the work with." Sarah felt the old familiar ache in her chest. "Papa, you know no man around here wants to marry a woman like me. I'm too tall, too strong, too unfeminine. I've heard it all my life." "Then they're all fools." Robert squeezed her hand. "Some man out there will see what I see. A strong, capable, beautiful woman who can do anything she sets her mind to. Maybe in some fairy tale." Sarah kissed his forehead. "Rest now. I have to check the cattle before dark." But as Sarah rode the fence line that evening, noting all the repairs that needed to be made, she couldn't stop thinking about Kieran Lawson, about his offer, about the way he'd looked at her, not with pity or mockery, but with something like admiration. That night she collapsed into bed, exhausted, fell asleep with tears drying on her cheeks, and woke before dawn to start it all over again. 3 days passed in a blur of back-breaking work. Sarah mended fences, moved cattle, repaired a broken water trough. Every evening she did the books by lamplight, trying to figure out how they'd pay the banknote coming due in 2 months. The numbers didn't add up, no matter how many times she went over them. On the 4th day, she had to go back to town for more medicine. Her father's cough had worsened. Dr. Chen insisted on a different, more expensive tonic. Sarah was at the apothecary paying for it when Kieran Lawson walked in. He looked cleaner than before, freshly shaved, hair trimmed, wearing new denims and a pressed shirt. He saw her immediately and his face lit up. "Miss Duncan, good to see you again." Sarah nodded politely, acutely aware of her own appearance. She wore her father's old shirt and patched trousers, her hair stuffed under a hat, dust coating her boots. Next to his clean respectability, she felt like something the cat dragged in. "Please, it's Kieran. Are you well?" His eyes were concerned, searching her face. "Well enough. Just picking up medicine for my father." "Is he worse?" "About the same." She paid for the medicine, wincing at the cost, and turned to go. Kieran fell into step beside her. "Have you given any more thought to my job offer?" "I haven't had time to think about much of anything, Mr. Lawson." "Kieran," he corrected. "I understand running a ranch alone is impossible work. I know because I'm trying to do it myself right now and failing miserably." Despite her exhaustion, Sarah felt a flicker of curiosity. "Failing? I thought you said you had experience." "I have plenty of experience ranching. What I don't have is 5 extra pairs of hands and about 30 more hours in each day." He grinned ruefully. I've spent the last 3 days trying to round up wild cattle that have been running loose for 2 years. Every time I get a group corralled, another group breaks through the weak fences. It's like trying to hold water in a sieve. Sarah found herself smiling despite her mood. You need to fix the fences first, then round up the cattle. So I'm learning. They reached her wagon, and he helped her load the medicine. Miss Duncan, can I ask you something? I suppose. Would you be willing to come look at my ranch? Not to work, he added quickly, seeing her expression. Just to give me your opinion on what I'm doing wrong. Your family's ranched here for years. You know this land, this climate. I'm new to California and could use advice from someone who knows what they're doing. Sarah hesitated. She should say no, should go home and take care of her own responsibilities. But there was something in his face, an openness and sincerity that made her want to trust him. And God help her, she was lonely, so terribly lonely. I can spare an hour, she heard herself say. An hour's all I need. Well, probably I need about a month of your time, but I'll take what I can get. His smile was warm, grateful. What Sarah didn't know was that this one decision would set in motion a chain of events that would transform everything she thought she knew about herself, about love, and about what she deserved. She followed his horse north along the road, past her own property line to the old Fitzgerald spread. Kieran hadn't been exaggerating. The fences were a disaster, broken in so many places she lost count. But the main house was in decent shape. Someone had clearly been working on repairs. I've been focusing on making the house livable, Kieran explained as they dismounted. Figured I had to have a place to sleep before I worried about the cattle. Maybe that was backwards thinking. No, it makes sense. Sarah walked the perimeter of the nearest pasture, her practiced eye cataloging problems and solutions automatically. Your biggest issue is that you have cattle scattered across 3,000 acres, with no way to manage them. You need to section off areas, create smaller pastures you can actually control. Fix the fences in sections, move the cattle into those sections as you go. Kieran pulled out a small notebook and started writing. What else? Sarah found herself talking more than she had in months. She explained water management and grazing rotation, showed him where the land dipped in ways that would cause drainage problems in winter, pointed out areas where the grass grew thickest. He listened intently, asking intelligent questions, treating her knowledge with a respect that made something warm unfurl in her chest. An hour passed, then two. The sun climbed high. Sarah suddenly realized how much time had gotten away from her. I have to go. My father needs his medicine. Of course, Sarah, I can't thank you enough. You've helped me more in 2 hours than I've managed to figure out in 2 weeks. He walked her back to her wagon. Can I pay you for your time? What? No, of course not. I was just talking. You were doing far more than that. You were sharing expertise that's taken years to build. That's worth something. He reached into his pocket. Mr. Lawson, I won't take your money for giving advice to a neighbor. That's not how things work out here. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Then at least let me return the favor. Your fences are in rough shape too. I saw them when I rode past your property. Let me come help you mend them. You have your own fences to worry about. And I'll get to them. But yours are urgent, and you're trying to do them alone. I have the time and the muscle. Let me help. Sarah wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain her pride, her independence, all the armor she'd built around herself over the years. But God, she was so tired, so overwhelmed. And his offer was genuine. She could see it in his eyes. All right, she said quietly. I would appreciate the help. Tomorrow morning, I can be at your place by sunrise. That would be good. Thank you, Kieran. His name felt strange on her tongue, intimate somehow. He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. See you tomorrow, Sarah. She drove home with a feeling she couldn't quite name fluttering in her chest. Hope, maybe, or something even more dangerous. But Sarah had no idea that tomorrow would be the first day of a transformation that would shake the foundations of everything she believed about herself. No idea that Kieran Lawson hadn't just bought a ranch in California. He'd been searching for something, or someone, he couldn't name. And when he saw her throw that drunk into the street, something in him had recognized something in her. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were about to embark on a journey that would test them, transform them, and prove that sometimes the person you need isn't the person you were looking for. Sometimes they're the person you never knew existed. Kieran arrived at the Duncan Ranch the next morning, just as the sun painted the eastern sky gold and pink. Sarah was already up, had already given her father his medicine and breakfast, fed the animals, and was walking the fence line with a bag of tools when she saw him riding up. He wore working clothes today, old denims and a faded shirt with sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. He'd brought his own tools and a cheerful whistle that seemed to make the morning brighter. "Morning, where do you want to start?" They worked side by side all morning, stretching wire, pounding posts, replacing broken boards. Sarah had expected it to be awkward, working so closely with a man she barely knew. Instead, it felt natural. Kieran worked hard without complaining, kept up with her pace easily, and had a knack for knowing what she needed before she asked. Around noon, Sarah went to make lunch. She found Kieran on the porch when she came out with bread, cheese, and cold chicken. He sat on the steps looking out over the land with an expression she recognized, the look of someone who loved ranching, who saw potential despite current roughness. "It's a beautiful place," he said as she handed him a plate. "Good bones. Your grandfather built well." "How did you know my grandfather built it?" "The craftsmanship, the way the house sits on the land, protected from worst winds but positioned to catch the breeze in summer. That's old knowledge, the kind that gets passed down through generations of ranchers." He took a bite of bread. "My grandfather taught me to read land the same way. He had a ranch in Montana, in the shadow of the mountains. Most beautiful place you ever saw. Why did you leave?" Kieran was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "He died 5 years ago, left the ranch to my uncle instead of me. My uncle didn't want a partner, wanted to run things his own way. So I took my inheritance, such as it was, and started working my way south. Worked ranches in Wyoming, Colorado, Texas. Saved every penny until I could buy my own place. Why California?" He looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "I was tired of winters that could kill you, tired of moving from place to place. I wanted somewhere I could put down roots, build something that would last. When I heard about the Fitzgerald place, it felt right." He paused. "Plus, I'd heard that California women were something special. Figured I should find out for myself." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You heard wrong. California women are the same as women everywhere else." "I don't know about that." His voice was soft, intimate. "The one I've met so far is pretty extraordinary." She didn't know what to say to that, so she focused on her food and tried to ignore the way her heart was racing. They ate in comfortable silence, then went back to work. By the end of the day, they'd repaired nearly a quarter-mile of fence, more than Sarah could have done alone in a week. "Same time tomorrow?" Kieran asked as he prepared to leave. "You don't have to keep coming. You have your own work." "Sarah," he said her name like it meant something. "I want to help. And honestly, working with someone who knows what they're doing is teaching me more than I could figure out alone. We're helping each other." "All right, tomorrow then." He tipped his hat and rode off into the gathering dusk. Sarah watched him go, that strange flutter in her chest again. Her father was awake when she went inside, sitting up in bed, looking more alert than he had in days. Who was that man I saw from the window? Kieran Lawson. He bought the Fitzgerald place. He's helping me with the fences in exchange for ranching advice. Robert's eyebrows rose. Is he now? And what's he really getting out of this deal? Papa, it's not like that. He needs help learning California ranching, and I need help with the physical work. It's a fair trade. If you say so. Her father's eyes twinkled. He looks like a good man, strong, capable. Papa. And tall enough that you don't tower over him. That has to be a nice change. I'm not listening to this. But she was smiling as she went to make dinner. Kieran came back every day for the next 2 weeks. They fell into an easy rhythm, working in the cool morning hours, breaking for lunch, working through the afternoon until heat drove them to shade. They talked while they worked, sharing stories about ranching, about their lives, about everything and nothing. Sarah learned that Kieran was 26, had a sister back in Montana who was happily married with 3 children, loved reading but rarely had time for it, and could play the fiddle though he hadn't touched one in years. He learned that Sarah had wanted to be a schoolteacher when she was young, that she could shoot better than most men, that she'd never been dancing because no man had ever asked her, and that her favorite place on earth was the ridge behind the ranch where you could see all the way to the ocean on clear days. He also met her father, bringing him books from town and sitting with him some afternoons, talking about ranching and politics. Robert Duncan clearly approved of Kieran, and the feeling seemed mutual. The fences got repaired. The cattle got moved to better pastures. The ranch started looking like someone cared for it again. And somewhere in the midst of all that work, Sarah realized she was falling in love. It terrified her. She'd spent so many years being too much for any man, had armored herself against rejection, had accepted that she'd probably live her whole life alone. But Kieran looked at her like she was exactly right, like her strength was attractive instead of off-putting, like he couldn't imagine anyone he'd rather spend his days with. She saw it in the way he smiled when she lifted something heavy without help, the way he asked her opinion on everything and actually listened, the way he'd started bringing her wildflowers he found on his rides, casual little gifts presented with an almost shy smile. She saw it in how he'd started staying for dinner most evenings, helping her cook and clean up, making sure her father was settled before he finally rode home in the dark. The way he looked at her across the table, his eyes warm and intense. She felt it in how her heart leaped every morning when she saw him riding up the road, how the work seemed lighter when he was beside her, how the house felt too empty when he was gone. 3 weeks after they started working together, they finished the last section of fence. Sarah stood back and surveyed their work with satisfaction. The Duncan Ranch hadn't looked this good in over a year. We make a good team, Kieran said quietly. Yes, we do. She turned to look at him and found him closer than she expected. Close enough that she had to tilt her head only slightly to meet his eyes. Close enough to see flecks of gold in the amber. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Her heart hammered. What is it? I didn't buy the Fitzgerald place just for the land. I mean, I did, but there was another reason too. He took a breath. I was tired of being alone, tired of working someone else's land, living in someone else's bunkhouse, having nothing and no one that was mine. I wanted a place where I could build a life, a real life with a family. That's a good reason. Thing is, I thought I'd get the ranch established first, then maybe start looking for a wife, someone who'd be a good partner, who understood ranching, who could handle the life. I had a whole plan worked out in my head. He took her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers. And then I rode into San Francisco and saw you throw a drunk twice your size into the street, and every plan I had went straight out the window. Sarah couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at him as he continued. I've never met anyone like you, Sarah. You're strong, capable, smart, beautiful. You work harder than any 3 men I've known. You take care of your father with such tenderness, then turn around and wrestle a fence post into the ground without breaking a sweat. You're everything I didn't know I was looking for. Kieran. His name came out barely a whisper. I know this is fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks. But Sarah, I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I think I'm already there. And I need you to know that before I lose my courage. His grip tightened on her hand. You're not too tall for me. You're not too strong. You're perfect. Perfect for ranch life. Perfect for me, if you'll have me. Tears burned in her eyes. You really mean that? Every word. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Sarah had spent years building walls around her heart, convincing herself she didn't need anyone, that she was fine alone. But Kieran had somehow slipped through every defense without even trying, just by being himself, just by seeing her for who she really was and loving her for it. I'm falling in love with you too, she said, her voice shaking. I didn't think I could. Didn't think anyone would ever want someone like me. But you make me feel like I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. You are. He raised his hand to cup her face, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. You are exactly who you're supposed to be. He kissed her then, soft and gentle and perfect. Sarah had never been kissed before, but this felt right. Felt like coming home. She wrapped her arms around his neck, and he pulled her close. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel too tall, or too strong, or too much. She just felt like Sarah, loved and wanted exactly as she was. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kieran rested his forehead against hers. I have a proposal for you. Actually, a few proposals. I'm listening. First, I want to court you properly. I want to take you to dances and bring you flowers and do all the things a man should do when he's serious about a woman. Second, I want to help you save this ranch. Your father's getting better with the new medicine, but he's never going to be able to work like he used to. Let me be your partner in keeping the Duncan place running. He paused. And third is more of a long-term goal. But Sarah, I want to marry you. I want to combine our ranches into one big operation. I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old watching sunsets from that ridge you love. I want everything. Sarah felt like her heart might burst. Yes. Yes to courting, or yes to everything. Yes to everything, all of it. But Kieran, you have to understand what you're getting into. I'll never be a delicate lady. I'll always be tall and strong and probably too opinionated for polite society. I'll want to work the ranch alongside you, not stay in the house doing woman things. Good. I don't want a delicate lady. I want you exactly as you are. He kissed her again, harder this time, with a passion that made her knees weak. I want a partner, Sarah, in all things. We'll run the ranches together, make decisions together, build something together. My father, I can't abandon him. I would never ask you to. We'll take care of him together. There's plenty of room in my house, or we can move into yours if that's easier for him. Whatever he needs. How are you real? Sarah touched his face wonderingly. How do you exist? I've been asking myself the same thing about you. He caught her hand and kissed her palm. Come to the dance with me Saturday night. Let me court you in front of the whole town. Let everyone see that you're mine and I'm yours. The thought of walking into a dance on Kieran's arm, of being seen as a couple, made her stomach flutter with nerves and excitement. I don't have anything appropriate to wear, and I don't know how to dance. Wear whatever you want. You look beautiful in a flour sack, and I'll teach you to dance. It's easy when you have the right partner. But what happened at that dance would shock everyone in town, and change Sarah's life in ways she never imagined. Saturday night found Sarah standing in front of her mother's old wardrobe, staring at the few dresses she owned. Most were practical work dresses, faded and patched. But at the back, she found the blue dress her mother had made her 5 years ago for a town social. Sarah had worn it once, feeling huge and awkward, while all the other girls looked dainty and lovely in their pastels. The dress had stayed in the wardrobe ever since. Now she pulled it out and held it up. It was simple but well made. A deep blue her mother had said matched her eyes. The cut was modest, but it would show her figure. She put it on with shaking hands. The woman in the mirror startled her. She looked different somehow. Still tall, still broad-shouldered, but there was a softness to her expression that hadn't been there before. A light in her eyes. She looked like a woman in love. Her father cried when he saw her. "You look just like your mother did the day I married her." "Sarah, honey, you're so beautiful." "I'm scared, Papa. What if I make a fool of myself?" "You won't, and even if you stumble, you'll be stumbling with a man who looks at you like you hung the moon." "That Kieran's a good man, Sarah. He reminds me of myself when I was young, before your mama smoothed out my rough edges." Robert reached for her hand. "You have my blessing. Both of you do." "I like him very much." "I know. I can see it. And I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. You deserve this. You deserve to be loved like this." Kieran arrived just after sunset, driving a wagon he'd borrowed from a neighbor and cleaned until it shone. He wore his Sunday best, and Sarah's breath caught when she saw him. He looked handsome and nervous and perfect. His eyes went wide when he saw her. "Sarah, you look stunning." "You don't have to say that. I'm not just saying it. You look incredible." He helped her up into the wagon seat, his touch gentle and reverent. "Everyone's going to be jealous that I'm the one you're with." The dance was being held in the largest barn in town, cleaned out and decorated with lanterns and wildflowers. Music spilled out into the night, fiddles and guitars and voices singing. Sarah felt her stomach clench with nerves as they approached. "We can leave any time you want," Kieran murmured, sensing her unease. "Just say the word." But when they walked in together, his hand on her back, something shifted. People turned to stare as they always did. But this time, Sarah didn't feel like a freak on display. She felt like a woman arriving at a dance with a handsome man who was proud to be with her. Kieran led her to the dance floor as a waltz began. "Follow my lead. I promise not to let you fall." She was clumsy at first, too aware of her size, too worried about stepping on his feet. But Kieran was patient, guiding her through the steps with quiet confidence. And he'd been right. With the right partner, dancing was easy. Natural. By the third dance, Sarah was laughing, flushed and happy, spinning around the floor in Kieran's arms. She saw the shock on people's faces, saw the women whispering behind their hands, saw some of the men looking at her with new consideration. She didn't care about any of it. All she cared about was Kieran, and the way he looked at her, like she was the only woman in the world. They danced almost every dance. During a break, several women approached them, curious and bold. "Mr. Lawson," one said, a pretty blonde named Margaret. "We heard you bought the old Fitzgerald place. How are you finding California?" "Beautiful," Kieran said, but his eyes were on Sarah. "Everything I hoped for and more." "And Sarah, we haven't seen you in town in ages. You look lovely tonight." Sarah recognized the false sweetness in Margaret's voice. Margaret had been one of the girls who'd whispered about her in school, had laughed at her height and strength. But tonight she couldn't muster any anger about it. "Thank you, Margaret. You look lovely as well." More people approached as the night went on. Sarah found herself pulled into conversations, included in the social fabric of the town in a way she never had been before. Having Kieran beside her changed everything. His obvious affection and respect for her made others see her differently. Or maybe, she thought, watching him laugh at something her old neighbor said, maybe she saw herself differently now. Maybe she'd been hiding her light for so long that she'd forgotten she had one. They left around midnight, both tired and happy. Kieran drove slowly, taking the long way home, and they talked about the evening, about the people they'd met, about everything and nothing. "Thank you," Sarah said softly. "Tonight was wonderful. It was perfect." Kieran pulled the wagon to a stop on the ridge behind her ranch, the one she'd told him was her favorite place. The moon was full and bright, painting everything silver. "Sarah, I know I said I wanted to court you properly, and I meant it. But I also need you to know that my feelings aren't going to change. I already know exactly what I want." "What do you want?" "You. Forever. But I'll wait as long as you need. I'll court you for a year if that's what you want. I just need you to know that I'm serious about this. About us." Sarah turned to face him, taking his hands in hers. "I don't need a year. I don't even need a month. I know what I want too, Kieran. I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep in your arms every night. I want everything you want." "Sarah." He pulled her close, kissing her with a desperation that matched her own. "I'll make you happy. I swear it. I'll spend every day of my life making sure you know how loved you are. I already know. You make me happier than I ever thought I could be." They sat on that ridge for hours, wrapped in each other's arms, talking about their future. They decided to get married as soon as possible, to combine the two ranches and build their life together. They talked about children, about the kind of parents they wanted to be, about raising sons and daughters who would be strong and capable and kind. "How many do you want?" Sarah asked, tucked against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I don't know. 3, 4, as many as you're willing to give me." He kissed the top of her head. "Though I have to admit, the idea of daughters who look like you and have your strength terrifies me a little. We'll have to beat the boys off with a stick when they get older." Sarah laughed. "And sons who look like you and have your charm. We'll have girls showing up at our door daily. Then I guess we'll have our hands full no matter what." He tilted her face up to kiss her again. "I can't wait." They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the Duncan Ranch. Robert Duncan walked his daughter down the makeshift aisle in the yard, tears streaming down his face, and gave her hand to Kieran with a blessing and a warning to take good care of his girl. "I'll spend every day trying to deserve her," Kieran promised. Sarah wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her taller frame. Kieran wore a new suit he'd bought in San Francisco. The ceremony was short and sweet, attended by neighbors and a few friends from town. When the preacher declared them husband and wife, and Kieran kissed her, Sarah felt like her heart might burst with happiness. But married life would bring challenges neither of them expected. Challenges that would test their love and their partnership in ways that would either break them or make them stronger than ever. They decided to live in Kieran's house, which was bigger and in better shape. It hurt Sarah to leave the Duncan Ranch, the home she'd grown up in, but Robert insisted. "This old place can stand empty for a while, or we can lease the land to your neighbors. Right now, you need to start your marriage in your own home, not living in your childhood bedroom." They moved him into the biggest guest room in Kieran's house, where he had a view of the combined ranch lands. The new medicine and reduced stress seemed to be helping him. He was coughing less, had more energy, could sometimes sit on the porch and enjoy the sunshine without exhausting himself. Sarah threw herself into learning the Fitzgerald Ranch, which they now called the Lawson Place. It was bigger than the Duncan spread, with more cattle and more complex water rights. Working side by side with Kieran, she helped him section off pastures, repair remaining fences, and round up the last of the wild cattle. It was hard work, dawn to dusk most days. But it was also joyful in a way Sarah had never experienced. She wasn't doing it alone anymore. She had a partner, a true partner, who valued her opinions and her strength equally. They made decisions together, worked together, celebrated successes, and learned from failures together. At night they collapsed into their bed, exhausted, but always with time for tender words and touches, for the growing physical intimacy of their marriage. Kieran treated her like she was precious, like every inch of her tall, strong body was something to be treasured. He made her feel beautiful in a way she never had before. 3 months into their marriage, Sarah realized she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, but hadn't wanted to say anything until she was sure. When Dr. Chen confirmed it, she rode home with her heart in her throat, excited and terrified in equal measure. She found Kieran in the barn mucking out stalls. He looked up when she came in, and his smile faded when he saw her expression. "What's wrong? Is your father all right?" "Papa's fine." Sarah took a deep breath. "Kieran, I have something to tell you." He dropped the pitchfork and came to her immediately, taking her hands. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant. I'm going to have a baby. We're going to have a baby." For a moment, he just stared at her. Then his face split into the biggest grin she'd ever seen, and he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "Sarah, are you serious? We're going to have a baby." "Kieran, put me down. I'm too heavy." "You're perfect. You're absolutely perfect." But he set her down gently, then dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your papa. I'm going to love you so much, both of you. I'm going to take such good care of you." Sarah ran her fingers through his hair, tears streaming down her face. "You're happy?" "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it." He stood and pulled her into his arms. "Sarah, you've given me everything I ever wanted. A home, a life, a love I never thought I'd find. And now a child. I'm the luckiest man alive." "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if I'm not a good mother? What if I'm too rough, too much?" "You're going to be an amazing mother. You're strong and loving and protective. Our child is going to be so lucky to have you." He kissed her softly. "And whatever happens, we'll figure it out together. That's what partners do." They told Robert that evening. He cried as Sarah had known he would, and said it was the best news he'd received in years. "I'm going to meet my grandchild. I wasn't sure I'd live long enough, but now I will." "Of course you will, Papa. You're getting stronger every day." "Because I have things to live for again. You two have given me that." He reached for Kieran's hand. "Son, thank you. Thank you for loving my daughter the way she deserves, for giving her the life she should have had all along. Thank you for raising such an incredible woman, sir. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of her." The pregnancy was easier than Sarah had feared. She felt well most of the time, just tired and hungry. Kieran hovered, wanting her to rest more, not to work so hard. But Sarah wasn't ready to give up her role on the ranch. Not yet. She worked alongside him well into her 7th month, only stopping when her belly got too big to climb fences and swing a hammer safely. Those last 2 months were difficult in different ways. Sarah felt huge and awkward, all her old insecurities about her size rising up again. But Kieran worshipped her changing body, telling her daily how beautiful she was, how amazing it was that she was growing their child. Their son was born on a cold February morning in 1873, after a long night of labor that left Sarah exhausted and Kieran white-faced with worry. But when Dr. Chen placed the squalling infant in her arms, all the pain disappeared. He was perfect. Tiny and red-faced and absolutely perfect. "He has your eyes," Kieran said, his voice choked with emotion as he knelt beside the bed. "Look at him, Sarah. We made him. He's beautiful." She couldn't stop staring at the baby, at this miracle they'd created. "Hello, little one. I'm your mama." They named him Robert after her father, with Thomas as a middle name after Kieran's grandfather. Robert Duncan held his namesake grandson and wept openly, saying it was the greatest honor of his life. Baby Robert was a good baby, healthy and strong. He grew quickly, and Sarah saw both herself and Kieran in his features. He had her height, already bigger than most babies his age, and Kieran's easy temperament. Taking care of him while managing the ranch was exhausting, but Sarah had never been happier. Kieran was an attentive father, changing diapers and walking the floor with the baby at night, giving Sarah breaks when she needed them. He sang to Robert in a surprisingly good voice, lullabies he remembered from his own childhood. He built a cradle with his own hands, carved with horses and cattle and the mountains he'd left behind. "I want him to know where we came from," he said, running his hand over the carved wood. "And I want him to know that we built this life with our own hands, that it's something to be proud of." When Robert was 3 months old, Sarah realized she was pregnant again. She hadn't expected it so soon, but Kieran was thrilled. "The more the merrier. I want a house full of children if you're willing." Their daughter was born the following November, an easy birth compared to Robert's. She was smaller than her brother had been, with dark hair and her father's amber eyes. They named her Rose, after Sarah's mother. Rose was different from Robert. She was fussy where he'd been easy, demanding where he'd been content. But she was also fierce and determined, and Sarah saw herself in that. "She's going to be a handful," she told Kieran as they watched the baby girl refuse to settle unless she was being held. "Good. The world needs more fierce women like her mother." The years blurred together in a happy haze of ranch work and child-rearing. Sarah and Kieran managed the combined ranches with increasing success. They hired a few hands to help with the heavy work, good men who respected Sarah's authority and worked hard. The cattle thrived, the land prospered, and they were able to pay off the banknote on the Duncan ranch ahead of schedule. Robert Duncan lived to see his grandson turn 5 and his granddaughter turn 3. He passed peacefully in his sleep on a warm spring night, and Sarah mourned him deeply, but took comfort in knowing he'd lived his last years surrounded by love and family. When Robert was 7 and Rose was 5, Sarah gave birth to twin boys, Joseph and James. They were identical, with Kieran's sandy hair and Sarah's blue eyes, and they were absolute terrors from the moment they could crawl. They got into everything, climbed everything, broke everything, and kept Sarah and Kieran running ragged, trying to keep up with them. "This is what we get for wanting a houseful," Sarah said, watching the twins dump out an entire bag of flour while trying to make cookies. She was too tired to even be angry. "Worth it," Kieran said, kissing her temple. "Every exhausting, chaotic moment is worth it." Their youngest child, a daughter they named Catherine, was born when the twins were 3. She was a surprise baby, unexpected, but welcomed. Catherine was sweet and gentle, where her siblings were wild, content to sit and watch the world around her with thoughtful eyes. "She's going to be the peacemaker," Robert, now 10, said wisely as he held his baby sister. "The one who keeps the rest of us in line." He was right. As the children grew, Catherine became the heart of the family, the one who mediated fights between the twins, who comforted Rose when she was frustrated, who reminded Robert not to be too serious. Sarah watched her children grow with a mixture of pride and wonder. Robert inherited her strength and Kieran's steady nature. He loved the ranch and spent every moment he could with his father, learning how to read land and manage cattle. Rose was tall like Sarah, strong-willed and independent, determined to do everything her older brother could do, and do it better. The twins were inseparable, always getting into mischief, but fiercely loyal to each other and their family. Catherine was the surprise, gentle where the others were rough, artistic where they were practical. "We did good," Kieran said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching their 5 children play in the yard. Robert was teaching Rose to rope a fence post while the twins wrestled nearby, and Catherine drew pictures in the dirt with a stick. "We did," Sarah agreed, leaning against him. They were both in their 30s now, marked by years of hard work and good living. Sarah's hands were calloused and rough, her face tanned from the sun. Kieran had silver starting at his temples, lines around his eyes from years of squinting at horizons. But when they looked at each other, Sarah still felt that same flutter she'd felt the first time he grinned at her in the San Francisco street. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Marrying me? Giving up your independence?" "Never. Not for a single moment." She turned to face him fully. "Kieran, before you I thought I had to be strong alone. I thought needing anyone was weakness. But you taught me that real strength is letting someone stand beside you, not behind you. You gave me partnership, not ownership. You gave me everything. You gave me more." He pulled her close. "You gave me a home when I was wandering. You gave me purpose. You gave me 5 incredible children and a life I couldn't have imagined in my wildest dreams. Sarah, I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I didn't think that was possible. I love you too, always." They kissed as the sun set behind the mountains, their children playing in the yard, the ranch spreading around them like a promise fulfilled. The years continued to pass in the good way that happy lives do. The ranch prospered beyond their wildest expectations. The land they'd fought so hard to maintain, the fences they'd mended together, the cattle they'd rounded up and bred carefully, all of it paid off. The Lawson Ranch became known throughout California as one of the best-run operations in the state. Robert grew into a young man who stood even taller than his father, with his mother's broad shoulders and steady strength. He had Sarah's gift for reading land and Kieran's head for business. At 18, he took over managing much of the day-to-day operations, giving his parents more time for other things. Rose was 16 and already turning heads, though she seemed oblivious to the attention. She was more interested in breeding horses than in the young men who found excuses to visit the ranch. She had her mother's height and strength, and she wore both with a confidence Sarah had never managed at that age. The twins, at 13, were still inseparable and still finding creative ways to cause trouble. But they were also hard workers and fiercely protective of their family. Joseph wanted to be a veterinarian and spent all his free time reading books about animal medicine. James wanted to explore, to see the world beyond California, though Sarah suspected he'd eventually come back to the ranch. Catherine, at 10, was already showing signs of artistic talent. She drew everything, filled sketchbooks with pictures of the ranch, the animals, her family. Kieran encouraged it, buying her better supplies from San Francisco, telling her that ranching wasn't the only way to make a good life. One afternoon in the summer of 1888, Sarah and Kieran rode out to the ridge where he'd proposed all those years ago. It had become their special place, somewhere they went when they needed to reconnect, to remember who they were beyond being parents and ranchers. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Sarah was 43 now, her dark hair streaked with silver, her body marked by years of hard work and 5 pregnancies. But she'd never felt more beautiful than she did when Kieran looked at her, the way he was looking at her now. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm the luckiest man who ever lived." He took her hand, threading their fingers together. "That the best decision I ever made was riding into San Francisco that day and seeing you throw a drunk into the street." Sarah laughed. "That wasn't your best decision. Your best decision was deciding I was worth pursuing, even though every other man in town had written me off. They were all fools, every single one of them." He raised her hand to his lips. You know what I see when I look at you, Sarah? What? I see the strongest person I've ever known. Not just physically, though God knows you can still best most men in a fair fight, but strong in all the ways that matter. Strong enough to keep going when everything seemed impossible. Strong enough to let me help when you'd spent years doing everything alone. Strong enough to build this life with me, to raise 5 incredible children, to create something lasting and beautiful out of nothing but hard work and love. Kieran, she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. I see the woman I fell in love with 16 years ago, and I fall in love with her again every single day. You're not too tall or too strong or too much. You're exactly perfect, and you always have been. Sarah kissed him, tasting salt from tears she hadn't realized she was crying. How do you always know exactly what I need to hear? Because I've spent 16 years learning you. Learning what makes you smile, what makes you laugh, what makes you feel loved. It's the best education I've ever had. They made love there on the ridge as the sun set, slow and tender and perfect. Afterwards, they lay wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars come out one by one. We should probably get back, Sarah said eventually. The children will wonder where we are. The children are fine. Robert's in charge, and he's more responsible than I was at 30. Let them wonder. I want just a few more minutes of this, of you and me and nothing else. So they stayed, talking about everything and nothing, making plans for the future, remembering the past. They talked about Robert maybe marrying the neighbor's daughter, who clearly had eyes for him, about sending Rose to a breeding program in San Diego to learn more about horse husbandry, about supporting James if he really did want to see the world beyond California, about finding the right art teacher for Catherine. We're getting old, Sarah said, though she was smiling. We're getting older. There's a difference. Kieran pulled her closer. And I plan on getting much older with you. 50 more years at least. I want to see our grandchildren grow up, want to sit on that porch when we're ancient and watch the ranch continue on through our children and their children. That sounds perfect. They finally rode home under a sky full of stars, their horses walking side by side, their hands clasped between them. The house was lit up, bright and welcoming, noise spilling out into the night. Their children were home, their legacy secure, their love stronger than ever. As they dismounted, Robert came out onto the porch. There you are. We were starting to worry. Your father was being romantic, Sarah said, handing him her reins. Gross, one of the twins called from inside, and everyone laughed. Later, after the children were finally in bed, Sarah and Kieran sat on their own porch, watching the moon rise over the land they'd built together. Kieran's arm was around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest. Sarah thought about how far she'd come from that lonely, exhausted woman, throwing drunks out of saloons. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For seeing me, for loving me, for giving me this life. Sarah. Kieran tilted her face up to look at him. Thank you for letting me. Thank you for taking a chance on a wandering cowboy who had big dreams but nothing to show for it. Thank you for being my partner in all things. Thank you for being exactly who you are. I love you, Kieran Lawson. I love you too, Sarah Lawson. Always have, always will. They sat there long into the night, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful together, who had proven that love and partnership and seeing someone for who they really are can overcome anything. The ranch spread out around them in the moonlight. Thousands of acres of land they'd worked and loved and would pass on to their children. The house behind them was full of the family they'd created, 5 children who would carry on their legacy of hard work and love and respect. Sarah had spent the first 23 years of her life being told she was too much, too tall, too strong, too unfeminine to ever find love or happiness. But Kieran had looked at her and seen not too much, but exactly enough. Perfect, he'd said, for ranch life with him. And he'd been right. She was perfect for ranch life with him, and he was perfect for her. They were perfect together. Two strong people who had built a life and a love that would last forever. As the moon climbed higher and the night grew deep around them, Sarah closed her eyes and let herself feel the completeness of it all. The weight of Kieran's arm around her, solid and sure. The sounds of their sleeping children drifting from upstairs windows. The smell of the land, their land, rich and real. The knowledge that tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more moments of joy and frustration, and everything in between. But they would face it together, as they had faced everything together for 16 years. Partners in all things, exactly as it should be. And that, Sarah thought, as sleep finally claimed her there on the porch in her husband's arms, was everything she had never known she wanted, and more than she had ever dreamed possible. She had found her home, her love, her purpose. She had found the person who looked at her and saw not someone to change or fix, but someone to cherish exactly as she was. She had found Kieran, and he had found her, and together they had built something that would last long after they were gone. A legacy of love and hard work and partnership. A family that would carry on their values. A ranch that would stand as testament to what two people could accomplish when they worked side by side with love and respect. Perfect, Kieran had said all those years ago. Perfect for ranch life with me. He'd been right then, he was right now, and he would be right for all the years to come. Perfect. If you loved Sarah and Kieran's story of finding love against all odds, don't forget to subscribe for more incredible tales of courage, romance, and the power of being exactly who you are. Drop a comment below telling us what you loved most about this story, and share it with someone who needs to hear that they're perfect just the way they are.